who are we without our jobs? Who are we really without work? So I've been thinking a lot about this question recently because I just left my 15-year corporate career a few months ago. So this question has been on my mind. Who am I without work? And just a few months ago, all of my life revolved around deadlines and meetings and teams and delivering tasks and solving complex problems in the workplace. But now that I find myself free, my time is free, something very interesting is happening. I'm actually realizing how important my work was in shaping my identity. But today, this question is not only about me, it's actually an overarching question for all of the world. A lot of economists and a lot of technologists are talking about this idea called post-labor capitalism. And post-labor capitalism basically says that with all of the automation and artificial intelligence that's being applied across sectors, we're going to have an abundance of goods and services, and human labor is going to be needed much less. So the question then that rises up for all of us, if we're not working, what are we going to do with our lives? And if work is so important for us, who are we if we're not working? Or who are we if we're working differently? What makes this even more interesting is that anthropologists categorize the number of hours worked per week throughout history. So hunter-gatherers worked something like 10 hours a week. Medieval farmers worked something between 20 and 30 hours a week, depending on the season. And then during the Industrial Revolution, people in factories were working really hard, like 60 to 70 hours a week. But then after labor unions came and there was a lot of collective action around the world, that number in the late 1900s went back down to 30 or 40 hours a week. But since the age of the internet and all of this technology we find ourselves living with across our lives, the number of hours we're working has started to go up since the late 1900s, early 2000s. And today, most of us find ourselves working 40, 50, maybe even 60 hours a week. So I have a question, which is, if we are a generation that's enjoying the most amount of technology, the most amount of efficiency, why are we still working even harder than hunter-gatherers in a cave? It just doesn't make any sense. And this is where the story actually becomes very interesting, because work is not only about economics. It's not only about the economy. Work is about psychology as well, because it serves three fundamental purposes in our lives. The first purpose is that work provides our livelihood. We need work to pay the bills, and that is obviously something that is very important for us. The second thing that work does is slightly more psychological. It's that work provides us with distraction and with purpose and with meaning, which is very important for all of us. We crave that and we need that. And the third, and I say maybe most important thing, is that work provides us with a sense of identity. The crazy thing is that if you remove these three things from people's lives, the entire psychological structure of society will shake. But why is that? To answer that question, we need to look at these three different things. So let's start with the most obvious one, right? Work provides our livelihood. So throughout history, people literally worked to survive, right? If I was a hunter-gatherer, I would need to go hunt or gather food to live. If I was like a medieval farmer, I would need to plant or, farm, or I would maybe die from hunger. The same happens throughout history. Even in the Industrial Revolution, even in postmodern societies like in the early 2000s, late 1900s, work is still tied to livelihood because of scarcity. We only have so much factors of production. We have only so much time. And for us to be able to distribute these resources across as many people as possible, work was created. The economy was created. But if abundance is going to become the status quo because of automation, because of artificial intelligence, then people actually don't need to work as much, and they're going to find themselves with a lot of free time. So the relationship between work and livelihood is now actually beginning to become weaker. And that is something that is shaking the psychological foundations of society around the world. The interesting thing is that our economies and our nervous systems are still not hardwired for that, right? We are not ready to live in a world where work is no longer necessary for people's livelihood. So that becomes also a very important question mark for us to meditate and think about. You see, the second role of work is more subtle, but it's equally as important. Work offers us a source of distraction, right? It offers us, oxytocin because of connection with colleagues. It offers us dopamine because we're achieving something. And, if those things stop, if that distraction stops for most of us, then what remains is just silence. And in that silence, a lot of uncomfortable questions might come up, like, who am I? What am I doing? Am I actually happy with my life? Do I actually enjoy the world that I live in? Do I actually enjoy the system? Is this company actually a good company? So many uncomfortable questions come up that maybe normally we are not allowed to think about. And honestly, even between us and ourselves, we might not be even comfortable answering. So this is a second aspect or a second pressure point where things are changing in terms of the social structure and the psychological structure of our lives and of society because of how work is changing. And the third aspect of how work contributes to our lives is that it gives us a sense of identity. When you first meet a person, the first thing they ask is, what do you do? And you immediately answer them, oh, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a lifeguard, I'm, a nurse. It doesn't matter. But the way you answer them actually tells you a lot about who you are in life. Who are you in position to the person you're talking to? What is your position in the world? What are your values? What you should be aspiring towards? So work, in a sense, is very hardwired into our sense of identity. But when the foundations of work change, when we find ourselves needing to work less, then these foundations of our identity are also going to be challenged because we find ourselves asking our questions much less. Like, I don't know what I'm doing actually because I can do so many different things. Who am I really? What is it that I should be doing with my life really? And this opens the gates for so much introspection and self-exploration because of how work is changing around the world. So the world is changing, let's be honest, right? Things are going pretty fast. And I want to be very honest. Like when I left my job a few months ago, I've been constantly wondering to myself, what is it that I'm doing? I wake up every morning, especially on Mondays, and I look that my week, I have so much time, but I don't have a lot of things planned to do. So naturally, I feel very, very confused. Like, what is it that I should do? And very guilty as well, because I feel like maybe I'm not making the proper use of my time. And the worst thing is that most people around me are actually working as well. So it's not like I'm in a society or I'm in a community that understands what I'm going through. It's not like we're all hanging out and having a good time together. But beyond that, this world is changing. And maybe the real question isn't who am I without work? Maybe the real question is just simply who am I? Because in a sense, if we really think about it, work has always been something that we use to escape deeper questions about ourselves. Work is just a tool that we use to express ourselves and express who we are. And if we're able to create that distance between our sense of identity and our job, between our sense of livelihood, fear of livelihood and our job, between our sense of distraction, purpose, and meaning in our job, then we're able to actually use our job as a tool instead of it using us as a tool. And I think this is one of the most fundamental and important questions that we need to really think about this day and age. It's not about who am I without work, it's about who am I? Because a lot of changes are unfolding around us. And if we're not asking ourselves that question, then we might find ourselves at the receiving end of a system that has never really thought about people's well-being and comfort. It's always thought about maximizing profit and, the well-being of big companies and power structures that are not necessarily in line with the true well-being of people around the world. So asking ourselves, who am I without work? Asking ourselves, who am I in general, even as a deep question, is no longer a luxury in the 21st century, especially in the age of automation. It is now a fundamental necessity for every human being to ask. We need to help each other ask these questions. We need to wake each other up because the more automation happens, the more standardization happens, the more power consolidates and economic value consolidates, the more inequality we might have around the world. And the more inequality we might have around the world, the more suffering, the more economic subjugation, and the more sense of people just being enslaved to cycles of consumption, empty, meaningless cycles of consumption where they feel very tired, where they feel very empty, and where they feel without any purpose in life. And it becomes even harder and harder to break free once you already find yourself in that cycle. Once you've already find yourself with kids and a 9-to-5, it's very much harder to escape. So the work needs to start from now. Before automation really takes root in our society and around the world, we need to ask ourselves this fundamental question. Who are we as human beings before we have a job? And how can we use our jobs as a tool for us to live a life that is more aligned with our authentic truth, with our authentic nature, and with our authentic voices? Whoever you might be around the world, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section. I think there's so much to talk about this topic and so many other topics. Sending you peace and love.